AI has a bad rep.
Yeah.
I feel like a lot of these different software companies are trying to do is to make AI use cases more niche.
You talk to anyone and number one thing that they want more of is like being in a flow state, right?
Professionals don't want to like prompt their creations. They want to be able to perhaps maybe start with a prompt, but then eventually like get your hands dirty with the tools that you already use.
To them, it will always feel like an abyss between the two. But to the average consumer, they're like, what are you talking about? Like, I still hear the same thing, you know?
It's not going to get better. It's going to be like equally as good and sound different. I think now the industry needs to look forward to like what's next. We've done the present day, we've done the past. So like, where do we go from here? How's it going, everyone? And welcome to the very first episode of the Time Off Audio podcast, sort of a pilot. In today's episode, Mo and I are starting off strong with the generative AI in music, as well as AI tools within DAWs themselves. We'll also be talking about the challenges of the plugin industry in 2025, along with trends in music tech and audio that we'd like to either see evolve or improve on, or do away with completely in 2026. And we'd love to hear from you. We're so genuinely passionate about the audio space, software, hardware, music business, and the creative workflow. And we want to make sure that the conversations that we have on the show are useful to engineers, producers, and musicians alike, with the goal to educate and stay on top of all the advancements in this ever-changing industry. So give us a shout, let us know your thoughts on the episode and potential discussion points for future conversations. All right, Music Tech and Software 2026, let's get into it. So I don't know if you actually saw what I put in the Google Doc. You put a topic of conversation, I put a topic of conversation, and then I added one more. So I don't know if you actually had a chance to look at what that is. It's spicy.
Oh, I didn't actually.
So the whole episode we had discussed is going to be what happened in 2025, and then what do we think is going to happen in the world of audio and in the world of music and tech in 2026. And I feel like we have to talk about AI.
Yeah, man. I had in my section, I had like a bit about AI that I sort of left out for this time being. So maybe it's good that you're bringing that up. So, you know, yeah. I just felt like it's such a big topic, man. I'm actually curious what you brought this time because I don't even know. I feel like I need to sort my thoughts about it, you know, around it a little more because, yeah.
Well, I think everyone is like figuring out their opinion on AI like in real time.
Yeah.
And so I have a couple of things that I wanted to bring up, which are the top uses of AI in audio and in music in 2025, which is kind of like the top uses of AI in this field in general, which is stem separation, noise and artifact removal, dialogue enhancement, AI-assisted mixing, and generative audio creation. Those are kind of like the top uses that AI was utilized for in 2025. And I guess my first question for you is, have you used any of these tools? Like, have you actually tried Suno or 11 Labs or Adobe or even within any of the DAWs?
Not really within DAWs. I know it's coming to Ableton. I think it's in beta right now, stem separation. I know it's in Logic. I haven't really used those much. I've used stem separation through La 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 AI. I don't know if you've heard of them. It's really good.
Same, actually. Yeah.
But no, I've tried Suno a bit and was kind of underwhelmed, I suppose, by how generic it sounded. Yeah, no, that's the extent to which I've used these tools. I use AI like every day in like development, you know, but outside of that, not much really.
So I think the interesting thing, I've used AI, I mean, quite a bit, I would say, because I like to try it out in different use cases. So I bought Lala AI to try stem separation and to use in class. Like I brought in like separated stems of like vocals and drums and bass and stuff like that to show, you know, what they sound like out of context of the mix. I've used 11 Labs for voiceover dialogue generation. I've never used Suno Studio, though it's definitely on my list to try. I do 100% get what you're saying about Suno, but, and here's like hot take. I actually think that AI in audio is actually moving in the right direction. Because historically, in 2025, for example, for the majority of 2025, Suno was entirely like a prompt based music generating thing where you just write like 3 sentences and then it just spits out a song.
Yeah.
Whereas what Suno Studio and what I feel like a lot of these different software companies are trying to do is to make AI use cases more niche, meaning that like you'll remove like noise in the background, or it'll be used for like mastering purposes, or it'll be used for, you know, creating a single instrument within the composition that you're making. And so it's no longer in, I think, I mean, we'll see what, you know, 2026 brings, but I think it means that it's going to be less generic and it's going to start being more creative. Because currently, as I'm sure you've seen on the internet, AI has a bad rep.
Yeah.
AI has, especially Gen AI, has a bad rep right now. Um, so I guess my question to you is like, as a creative, how do you feel about incorporating AI workflows into like creation?
Dude, I really want it to be like a core bit of the production workflow. I'm not actually against it on I just want to nuance this a bit, right? Because I understand the ethical and the copyright issues and all that. And that is like a rabbit hole of its own that I don't think I've educated myself well enough to be like, out here talking, about that. But just from a workflow perspective, right? Like when I'm in the studio, like obviously I think you talk to anyone and number one thing that they want more of is like being in a flow state, right? Like not, writer's block or like, weird technical things or like having an idea, but like struggling to get it out there. And that's also part of, we'll never be able to fully remove that. I think like, that would be a utopia. And that bit, like getting rid of the process is like what bothers me about the initial, like what bothered me about the initial sort of ethos of Suno, right? And even their CEO, I don't know his name, but in a few sort of interviews that I've seen, like it kind of rubbed me the wrong way, where he talks about hating, the process of like being a musician and like having to learn to play an instrument and all that, and kind of like wanting AI to jump through everything and take us to the results, right? Which ends up being these like half-baked, like generic ideas. And it's like, you're missing the whole kind of, process, right? Where you might hate it, but that's what people are there for, right? So for me, like I'm all for it. I think, I suppose like a question I have is, does Suno do like MIDI generation, like symbolic generation, or does it just spit out like full audio?
As far as I know, it spits out full audio. And it's funny that you mentioned that, because in my notes for this podcast episode, in my bullet point notes, what I put is what is going to be in store for AI in 2026. And I put like MIDI generation and actually using the tools
Yeah.
to be able to like it'll kind of like throw like generic parameters at you, so you get like as close as you can to like a drum sound, for example, that you're going for, and then you can tweak it from there. But like that has not been possible in Suno in 2025.
Yeah.
I think that's like where AI is going in music creation in 2026.
For sure, man. I think that's where I wanted to take this, because I think I met a few people at Audio Developer Conference. They were working on this company called Lemonade, I think, or, I think there's definitely some AI MIDI generation, startups out there and ideas. I know it's something that's being developed. I just wasn't sure if Suno was taking it on, because here's how I see it ultimately, right? Is, you want like prompt based is in music is kind of bullshit, right? Like it shouldn't be like I'm not here typing, like fix this, bring it down an octave, like change this chord to C sharp major. Like, it's not how it's gonna end up being, I think. I'm pretty sure. I think right now is just that, with LLMs, you're struggling with feeding them with the right context, right? So the way DAWs are architected from the ground up is like makes it, somewhat challenging. And we don't have open protocols for, having a plugin know what's happening on other tracks and in other plugins, and even like classifying the audio of different tracks. Like that's what you need to make like a fully context aware, like, AI, right? It needs to know that, okay, this track is a guitar and like it's playing these chords, right? And this is a drum and like this frequency range is muddy because it's clashing with the bass on this other track and so on. So when you have that, and your LLM will be able to essentially adapt in real time as you're making changes, right? Like if you change the root notes of your bass line, it might understand, oh, like let me change the chord progression or like change the voicing because it's gonna whatever, right? Like sound better. And that, I think, just understanding the space a little bit, I think doing it symbolically through MIDI is going to be more effective to get us started, because it's way easier to parse MIDI than to parse like, audio, right? Like I can, like you can build like it exists today, right? You can have like, a chord recognition, right? Like, piece of software based on like the MIDI notes in it. And, MIDI is fully parameterizable, right? So you have velocity, you have CC parameters and so on. So even to generate audio from MIDI is, to me, is like, this is the way you want to start exploring this space. I think for me as like an AI curious person, and, we haven't built AI into our plugins yet at Time Off Audio, but it's something I'm very curious about at some point. And I think this is the space I would start exploring, really, is, we already have, it's kind of like the ethos of what we're doing too, is like you already have your favorite synths, right? You already have your favorite, drum machine, or like, drum, emulation or bass emulation, and all that. So why not make the AI that will play your instruments as opposed to replace them, right? So,
For sure.
I think yeah, it's the way I want to see like things evolve, because MIDI is also changeable by the human, right? So you become almost like co-producers, playing with the symbolic representation of your track. And also, yeah, like Suno being like maybe plugin aware, right? So, hey, it knows the Fab Filter plugin, right? It read the manual, it knows the parameters that this plugin exposes. It's been trained on like, and then it kind of like, we're bridging the gap with like AI mastering and mixing, right? And it all comes under one umbrella.
Mm-hmm.
These are my thoughts, man. I'll leave it there because, I could talk for the next 30 minutes, but symbolic really, I think, is the way I want to see things move in this space.
Yeah. The other thing is, if AI gen becomes more of like MIDI generation, I think it will do a much better job at removing artifacts, right? Because all of a sudden the human has much more control, because you receive MIDI and you can actually like change that. So I think as far as getting a lot of artifacts, with which AI generation still has artifacts that sound, you get like kind of like weird sounds, or like instruments that don't really sound like any one instrument. It kind of sounds like a combination instrument. It's like you can't tell if something's a guitar or a piano. It's just kind of like it's a
average, right? That's what LLMs do. I mean, I guess in audio it's not LLMs technically, but yeah, AI is just creating averages, right? So if you like, it's easy to mix waveforms together. It's almost, it's a very, very difficult problem to unmix them, right? So a lot of the time you end up having like things are mixed together, right? That are not unmixable.
Cool. Well, I have one last thing on AI, and then maybe we can move on because it'll be like a decent segue into the next topic of conversation. We talked about like where AI is going, or where we think and hope maybe that AI in music is going. Where do you think it's not going? So, like, what are the things that happened in 2025 that are definitely probably going to die in that direction for 2026. If you have anything off the top of your mind, or I can start with something if you'd like.
Man, 2025, man, this is a funny thing. I think I'll talk about it in my section too. My section as well is, I don't know, because, funnily enough, this thing happens when you're like building in the space yourself, like building plugins, building software and stuff. It's like, it becomes so much harder to like keep up with, what everyone else is doing. Obviously, in a way, you're more connected and you're in it and in the industry. But yeah, when I think you're probably better placed than me, just being like a professor and a content creator, like as just, watching these trends. I feel like,
I mean, I don't know. I feel like we both. I think the interesting thing about this podcast and our working together is that we come from different backgrounds, but like we're in the same space. And so I feel like you understand more of like the software and the actual like technicality behind AI and the LLMs and the programming versus maybe I have more of an understanding of like how it's used in like industry or like, with freelancers and like
yeah,
that
yeah,
sort of
yeah.
thing.
Yeah, so I mean, I think, like I said, I have some thoughts on where it might be going and where it should be going, maybe, but where it's not going, that's an interesting. So you go for sure.
So I have, to be honest, I have two things. One actually you talked on already, so I'll start with that one, which is I think like the prompting generative AI is going to start declining because that's not what like creators want. We don't want to like prompt create music or video or photos. Like I feel like generative AI is used in many different industries, and in all of those industries, people who are using it like for real are professionals, and professionals don't want to like prompt their creations. They want to be able to perhaps maybe start with a prompt, but then eventually like get your hands dirty with the tools that you already use. Like for example, the plugins that we use.
Mm.
That is the one thing that you touched on already, and I 100% agree with you. And then the second thing, and this is more of like a general thing, is I don't think that AI is replacing producers or engineers just yet. Anyway, in 2026, I think it's very much still a tool, and hopefully it'll get integrated in a creative way even better, but it's still not being completely outsourced. Like, I don't think any artist is going to be like, hey, like, Suno Studio, please mix and master my album. Okay, thanks, bye.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think I would say I share your, especially on the second bit. I think first bit, yeah, we touched on that earlier with the prompts. I'll just like add some more context there. Like, I think prompting is the easiest way to give context to like an LLM, right? But what we don't know is that like these LLMs have like, I don't know what the right term is, but like system prompts, like meta prompts, right? This is how you inject things like, guardrails and like safety and stuff. But then obviously it's never perfect, right? I think we've moved, we've heard the term prompt engineering. Now, I think with LLMs having what we call like larger context windows, right? They're just able to hold more data in their like short-term memory, right? So this is what makes like ChatGPT remember like the thing you told it 10 messages ago, right? In audio, I think the sheer kind of bandwidth of data that you're dealing with is so high, right? Like you need basically ways to distill that information. Like things are happening. Let's say you have 64 tracks in your, project. You need a way to have that condensed so that your, co-producer AI, like, kind of like a human, right? You can't hold like you have to zoom in on one thing and you kind of lose focus of the other thing. And then if you focus on that other thing, you kind of zoom out of the prior thing. So this is all such a like difficult thing to do right, because it's such a high bandwidth like form of like, of media, so you need things like classifiers, right? Like I was saying before, you want things that are able to classify your audio in close to real time, right? And that is very difficult to do accurately. So all this to say, I think it will start going away, like the prompt-based approach, but I'm not sure it will happen so quickly, because the technical sort of challenge is quite, quite massive. Now, what I think it will happen is we'll probably see it happen, like we'll see the prompt-based approach like get phased out in specific situations, right? And we'd probably need a new DAW all like from the ground up to see this done properly, because DAWs are like so, I'm going to touch on this too in my section. They're dinosaurs, right? They were built 30 years ago, and in many ways they still need to work the same way that they were initially built. But we need sort of like different modes, right? Like, what do you do in a DAW, right? Like, are you in songwriting mode? Are you in editing mode? Are you in recording mode? Are you in mixing mode, mastering mode, right? Like, they kind of like the lowest common denominator for all these things. And they don't really adapt like in a dynamic way, right? You might have a template for songwriting and a template for mixing, and your AI co-producer needs to be wired completely differently for these two modes, right? So, so that's the challenge. Like for us to see like a true, moving away from a prompt-based like approach and like full context awareness, I think we needed a new DAW, like really, like, and
Spicy.
So, and when you say that, you're like, okay, in the music industry, the moment you like, I think a lot of people say we need a new DAW, like maybe like the Figma of DAWs, right? Where it's like collaborative, it's online first, it's browser native. You kind of start losing people too, because, the big, audio production studios for film and Hollywood and stuff. They're like, what do you mean? Like, I'm been on Pro Tools since the 90s. Like, bye, good luck with your new DAW. So yeah, man, probably like all the DAW, like, Avid and Ableton and Apple are going to try to obviously tackle this problem. But I think because of the backward compatibility requirements, it's going to not end up being it. Right. And then you'll have the newcomers who are probably going to start building this in the correct way, but without getting any real, traction in terms of like professional usage. And then your guess is as good as mine where this is going to go, So I think it connects to the wider sort of movements happening in the industry, like the music tech space. Yeah. I think I maybe I was rambling a bit there, but hopefully something there was useful, in terms of my thoughts on where this is all going.
For sure. I think actually we can pick up right here and continue with music tech retrospective and what's next in 2026.
Yeah. So one thing I wanted to talk about, John, is I was saying I've been heads down in 2025, launching Dime TT, Dime MS, moving, from the UK back home here in Montreal, and, becoming a dad. It was a crazy year now that I list all these things, as you know. Yeah. But so to be honest, in the midst of all this, like, funnily enough, being like a music tech founder, like I was saying, kind of makes you so busy that you're not necessarily keeping up with what other companies are doing, what else is happening in the industry. So one person I sort of turn to whenever they publish something, whether it's a video or a post or something, is this guy called Joshua Hodge. He's the founder of The Audio Programmer. So if anyone knows, and for sure if you're in the music tech space, you've heard of The Audio Programmer. it's a community, like an online community dedicated to teaching audio development, audio software development, basically to the world, right? And it played a massive role in kind of helping me step into the audio world. Obviously, I've been a programmer for most of my life, but audio programming is like a different beast. You know, you could be doing web development, you could be doing embedded systems, you could be doing anything else, but audio is kind of like its own, you know, meta, like own game.
Mm-hmm.
So they've been and Joshua himself has been, you know, a pioneer in this space, kind of like, and, you know, bridging the gap to like newcomers in the industry. But it's also made him like very connected, right? So he, you know, he knows everyone from like people at Avid to people at Ableton to I've had the chance to meet him a few times at conferences. Just all around great guy. And he's all about open and, you know, opening the space for people. And he released sort of 2 videos, like his own kind of retrospective of the music tech space specifically, right? One of the videos is called The Audio Software Shifts No One Is Talking About. And the other one I forget, but go on YouTube. Definitely, this is an invitation to everyone listening to go check them out. And
we can put it in the show notes.
Yes. And my own sort of, you know, way of, you know, maybe bringing some elements of, you know, looking back at 2025 and where things might be going in the music tech space is really to, you know, pay attention to what Josh was saying. And one thing, like, one thing he talks about is 2025 was really like a tough year for plugin makers specifically. I think I wouldn't know if this affected us or not at Time Off Audio, because I think we're kind of like so new, and, you know, I was super happy with how 2025 went for us. But it's not a scientific experiment. I didn't have like many copies of 2025 to, you know, compare, you know, how the performance was, let's say, in terms of sales and reception and stuff.
Yeah.
But
A/B test 2025.
Exactly, man. I wish, right? But from Josh's perspective, and, you know, he didn't give numbers. Obviously, like, our industry is very closed in that sense. You know, things didn't go well for plugin makers, you know, other than some exceptions, right? Like, we've seen a crazy, insane, like, Serum 2 launch, right? Omnisphere 3 were the big ones, I think. Might be missing other ones for sure. But in many ways, it's been like, there's this sense of fatigue. You know, that's the way I see it. And, you know, the industry tried to kind of counteract this with like bundling, discounting, like crazy discounts. Like, you know, anecdotally, like, we've been approached by wholesalers to do like insane discounts and, like, you know, flash sale type things. And we just, you know, said no. Obviously, you know, we tried ourselves, like, some, you know, we've experimented with things like Black Friday and things like that. You know, nothing wrong with that. But it seems like there's this fatigue and underperformance and things kind of like slowing down a bit. And yeah, there's like, that's kind of like the tone of the year, right? Like, not super optimistic, you know? And so that's like on the commercial side, right? Like the shifts that have been happening in 2025. Now, on the technical side, there were some very interesting developments also. So you're familiar with, obviously, like, you know, Audio Unit, VST3, AAX as plugin formats, right? Have you heard of Clap?
Yeah. Well, I actually watched Josh's video just to get ready for the podcast, but I don't really know what it is. So please do explain.
Yeah, so Clap is like I wouldn't say a fourth, because I suppose there's other ones too, other plugin formats, but Clap is like you know, a major, what's becoming a major, and maybe even saying that is like, you know, me endorsing it in a way where it's in a phase of, you know, trying to get endorsement. It's a plugin format. It literally stands for Clever Audio Plugin Format, I think. CLAP, Clap. And it was initially, there's like a small consortium of companies. I think it's UE Audio and Bitwig. Bitwig supports it already natively. A lot of the DAWs are trailing in this. They're not supporting it. But yeah, we have like Clap coming to basically modernize the audio format space. Steinberg open sourced VST3 as a format. So now you could have basically other developers come in and build on top of it. So I think it's their way of signaling that we're not going to build the VST4 format. It's basically going to be open source. That's my interpretation. I could be wrong. And there's just like this, you know, on the technical side, there's like a breath of fresh air, you know, even though on the commercial side, things are stagnating. For me as a developer in the space, there's like so many more ways you can enter the audio space now because you have embedded WebView UIs. So you could come from like the web world and sort of, you know, get an easy introduction there. There's, you know, you could build tools with Rust, with different programming languages now. You're no longer kind of tied to C++. And everything I'm saying is nuanced, right? Like it's not in absolutes, you know, not everyone can come in and build plugins right away. But it's easier than ever for indie developers to like build serious tools, right? And be like providing value to people, professionals in this space. So what this means, if you take it back to the business side, is like the competitive edge in this space is no longer, you know, access to tech or like how difficult it is because it's kind of becoming democratized and easier. So it's an interesting thing to see. So how come, you know, sales are slowing down, but like on the innovation side, it's easier than ever to innovate, right? And I think that's like an interesting disconnect that's happening, right? And the way I see it is we'll still see like this innovation trickle down into like very cool new, you know, products and plugins and even beyond plugins, right? Like I think what it's gonna translate into is maybe even the shifting of the tools, like the meta of the tools that we've come accustomed to, like your DAW, your plugins. More and more, I think we're going to go into a world where there's DAW interoperability. You know, we have newer, more modern plugin formats. Maybe one day we'll get the Figma of DAWs, right? I keep bringing it up. I think it's subconsciously is something on my wish list. I want to see that happen, you know?
Yeah.
So yeah, it's that's sort of like the second pillar of observations, right? On the technical side. So yeah, so like I was saying in Josh's retrospective, and his two retrospective videos, which I found super, super interesting, and that I really invite everyone to check out. This is sort of my way of distilling it and kind of like teasing people to go check it out because they're truly insightful pieces. Was that 2025 was a relatively slow, I don't want to say bad or sad or like, you know, make it very negative, but slow year for plugin developers. And obviously we've seen some commercial moves to try to mitigate that, you know, bundling, heavy discounts and so on. But the general theme and observation is one of fatigue and, you know, slow down. Now, as a developer and as, you know, as an audio developer, simultaneously as things are sort of slowing down commercially, on the technical side, they've never been as open and innovative, I would say. The barrier of entry has never been lower to develop audio tools and plugins. We have brand new formats like Clap, you know, making it, just bringing a touch of modernization to audio formats. We have like languages like C major. You can make plugins in Rust now, UIs in WebView, and like using, web technologies. And this is just the tip of the iceberg, right? Like there's so many movements happening on the technical side that I'm seeing that this has to translate into more innovation, right? Simultaneously as there's stagnation and fatigue from what's on offer today, the technical capabilities that we have in the audio industry are making it so that we can build tools that we couldn't build before, right? And I think that's sort of the stage we're in, right? I think we're waiting for the tools and the innovation that we're offering music makers, audio engineers, audio professionals. We're waiting for the innovation to trickle down. And I'm not just talking about AI, by the way. AI is definitely a core piece of it. And Josh does talk about AI in his video. I sort of left that bit out in my kind of analysis. I think partly because, again, I want to study the AI bit, like kind of separately for my own sake, to understand it sort of in isolation.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't necessarily think it's a time to be, to despair. And like for us, like audio tool makers, right? I think quite the opposite. I think now is the time to really think outside of the box, right? Like the fatigue we're seeing I attribute it to, I don't want to, hot take. I don't want to offend anyone, but sort of like
let's burn some bridges, Mo. Let's do it. Let's burn the bridges.
I think plugin makers have gone, maybe like the vast majority of plugin makers have gotten very lazy, right? And this is not an attack to any specific person. I think the industry was also, if you look in not just 2025, but in the last few years, there's like so many private equity takeovers and, layoffs. And, you're going to touch on, Fender and PreSonus and like these kinds of like, mergers and acquisitions and consolidation, moves. I think that just led to sort of race to the bottom where I don't, that in itself is just like slows down the industry in my view, right? Because what you want to see is not like, how can we discount this plugin that's just a compressor with a nice interface so we can sell more of it, because no one asked for that, People have like true like modern like problems, right? Like in like we're saying, how do you make DAWs interoperate, right? How do you make your plugin formats less closed so that plugin developers can bring you really interesting cross-track context and things like that, right? Like there's structural innovation barriers in this space that a merger of two companies isn't going to fix in itself, right? Or like discounting a skeuomorphic, another skeuomorphic EQ isn't going to fix. So that's what's happening in my view, is this kind of meta of the last few years on the private equity side of things, and the way the industry has been bringing products to people is people are tired of it, and even maybe subconsciously, like people are fatigued of seeing the same thing. And in my view, not to pull a shameless plug here, but I think this is what got me excited to build these meta plugins and with time off audio is we're not going full, like, let's build a new DAW, right? Because I want to see that happen. But in the meantime, I think there's layers of innovation we can bring and try things that haven't been tried before, right? Like, how can you make your plugins more useful, right? Without like building a new DAW, right? Like, okay, let's think about how we can host plugins in a different context and then bridge that to the DAW, right? Ideally, we build some, DAW interoperability kind of system. AI is going to come and help a lot of the workflow, cookie cutter, repeatable kind of, annoying, bits that everyone wants to do away with, right? And this is where I see the space kind of going in terms of like what's going to excite people again, right? Like individual effects are more or less a solved problem, right? Like, I think especially us like developers, we like to like nerd out about the latest and greatest DSP. They'll always have its place, but ultimately it's like we need to offer things that solve problems, right? Like, you have, I don't know, for sure you have like more than 4 EQ plugins and I have more than like 5 reverb plugins. I'm only going to get so excited by a 6th one, that's going to,
Yeah.
I need, I have different problems than like just what's another cool effect, right? So
Yeah.
that's
The way I see it,
yeah.
if you don't mind me interjecting, the way I see it is I feel like when plugins first started, getting developed and like we start in the box mixing, the first thing that happened is like, let's create like the present hardware.
Yeah.
Right. Like the present day hardware. And so we get all of these effects like the basics. We get EQ, we get compression, we get delay, we get reverb. And then I feel like the industry moved towards, wow, we want to emulate hardware in the digital form. And so like we go from this present day approach to more of like how can we emulate like historical gear present day. And so the entire industry shifted towards like, let's make sure that we can emulate tape and let's make sure that we can emulate like hardware as best we can digitally. And I think we've done it. I think that like at this point, like another amp modulation or another, we'll talk a little bit about Fender Studio. It's not going to get better. It's going to be like equally as good and sound different. So we've done the modulation thing. I think now the industry needs to look forward to like what's next. We've done the present day, we've done the past. So like, where do we go from here?
100%. And I think there's also like a rabbit hole in the process of trying to make digital catch up to analog, because there's always going to be structural trade-offs in that process that will never make it. It's like it's like in math, it's called like an asymptote, right? It's like converging towards it, but it will never be there. But like the people who like become more and more obsessive will keep zooming in, and it will always, to them, it will always feel like an abyss between the two. But to the average consumer, they're like, what are you talking about? Like, I still hear the same thing, So it was time. I think that's called diminishing returns. And it's time for people to like stop, kind of step away from that a bit. This is not what's going to keep the innovation, moving forward. And 100%, man, like, well, how do we build like truly digital first? Like, we're in that world already, right? Like, we need to think that way, right? And innovation has this funny thing about it where we as humans, whenever we're presented with an innovation, we don't realize that our thinking is still lags behind, right? Like, the first TV shows were just cameras pointed at a radio show. You know what I mean? And or like at a theater, there were still kind of like these, still stuck in the past a bit, right? And we're moving in that direction, though. I'm confident. There's so many cool companies building like in this space, and I think my message to conclude, like, music creators, audio professionals, is, don't despair just yet about like what's on offer right now. I think obviously there's still so many very, very like high quality plugin companies, Fab Filter, Erk Sound, like I'm Sonable, like so many. But at the same time, I feel like now is probably a good time to like try to tune out the noise. It's okay, get back to your DAW, do the things how you're used to doing them, And I think the innovation that I'm seeing on the technical side will for sure trickle down into products, right? That will, delight people and actually solve problem and make their life as music creators better. But that's a messy process that's going to take a while, I can't predict that bit, but I'm confident that's the direction we're going. Much like AI tools, I think right now there's like this race, like to the moon or whatever you want to call it, like to the Wild West a bit. Every idea will get funding, right? You say, I have an AI, before you finish your sentence, here's $5 million. Go build it,
Money. Yeah.
And most of those experiments will just like crash and burn, right? But the few that are left will be so transformational, right? So they will be the things that will kind of keep going forward as humanity, I will say. So that's going to happen also at a smaller scale in audio. Just give it time, guys. It's coming.
Love that. I think that's a great place to conclude. And just for anyone who's watching, for our audience, I guess a question is: are there any trends that you think we missed? Is there anything that you really do not want to see in 2026 moving forward? And what are the things that you're most excited for?
Hell yeah.
See you soon.